Good evening, everybody. It's 7 p.m. Time to call the December 6th, 2021 meeting of the Westfield, Washington Township Advisory Plan Commission to order. Will staff please note the presence of a quorum for us?
Ms. Berkman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Here.
Mr. Horke?
Here.
Mr. Johns?
Here.
Dr. Kelleher?
Here.
Mr. Maui?
Here.
Mr. McCarty?
Here.
Mr. Schmitz?
Here.
Ms. Boljerick?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a set of minutes from our November 15th meeting to approve this evening. We've all had an opportunity to take a look at them. Does anybody have any questions or comments, or is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second
We have a
that.
motion by Victor McCarty and a second by Andre Maui. Will staff please call the roll?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Boljerick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Will staff please review the rules and procedures for this evening's meeting?
Due to the COVID-19 emergency, as declared by the Governor of Indiana, the format and conduct of the meeting has been modified to comply with executive orders regarding the conduct of public meetings, public hearings, and public gatherings. Relevant portions of the Indiana Open Door Law have been amended or suspended during the pendency of the emergency. For items that do require a public hearing tonight, the meeting will have the following structure. The department will summarize the petition, then the petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present to the Plan Commission. The president will open a public hearing, and all individuals will be given 3 minutes to speak. The public hearing will be closed when all interested members of the audience have had a chance to be heard, and all emails received during the meeting have been provided to Plan Commission members. The petitioner will then have a chance to respond to comments, and the Plan Commission will follow with any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the petition. For our non-public hearing items, the following structure will apply. The department will summarize the petition and highlight what changes, if any, have been made since the last Plan Commission meeting. The department will also describe what action, if any, is necessary to be taken. The petitioner will be given up to 15 minutes to present any changes, and the Plan Commission will act upon the petition. For our general rules of conduct, we ask that you please not disrupt the proceedings in any way. If you need to have a private discussion, we ask that you please quietly exit the room. Please silence your devices at this time, and again, if you must answer them, please quietly exit the room. If you are attending in person and wish to speak in regard to a petition scheduled for a public hearing, please fill out a yellow card, which is available both at the back of the room and up front, and provide it to us prior to the presentation of your petition. During your comments, please state your name and address into the microphone for the record, and we ask that you please not repeat previously stated comments. Your presentation will be timed, and you will be advised when there is approximately 30 seconds remaining. If you are not attending in person and wish to comment on a petition, please email planners@westfield.in.gov with the petition name or number included in the subject line. These comments will be forwarded to Plan Commission members and the petitioner. We'd also like to remind everyone to please speak directly into the microphone so your comments can be put onto the record. Also, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, and if you do come up to speak at the podium, please ensure that the microphone is on as indicated by the green light. Thank you.
Thank you. There are 2 changes to our agenda this evening. The Courtyards at Westfield plat amendment is being withdrawn. That was an amendment that was for a change in their plan, which has now been further changed and will not need to come before us again. And the only item of business, Town Run, is not here actually, as it turns out, for a recommendation, but for comments to further address. So if anybody was here for those items and doesn't want to stick around, now's your chance. We have no consent agenda items. We do have a miscellaneous item of business, a request to suspend our rules and procedures regarding yard signs. This is something associated with our second public hearing, the South Park Industrial, and staff will explain the need for this suspension, or the request of the suspension of the rules.
Thank you, President. So just to add on to that, the South Park Industrial Overall Development Plan, the petitioners are requesting to suspend the rules as it relates to the yard sign public noticing aspect of public noticing. They Their public notice was November 26th to put the sign out, and they placed the sign on November 29th, so that's 3 days after the deadline. I have confirmed that they have sent out all of their public notices via the mail, and the newspaper public notice was submitted as well. So all of their noticing requirements were met. The only exception was just the 3 days after for putting the yard sign on the property. Thank you.
Thank you. This has happened a couple of times. We'll open the floor for any comments. It's a relatively minor thing to accomplish, but if there are any questions and concerns, please raise them now. Dr. Kelleher?
Just one. Caleb, how far ahead do they have to put the yard sign out? Is it 10 days?
In front of the meeting?
Yeah, well, when is the requirement that they put them out? Is it 10 days?
It's 10 days, yes.
Okay, so we're only missing 3 out of 10 then.
Mhm.
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? If not, is there a motion to go ahead and suspend this rule to assure that this development can remain on track?
I will make a motion to suspend the rules for this yard sign.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Kelleher and a second by Cindy Spalcherik. Will staff please call the roll?
Ms. Bergman?
Yes.
Mr. Deck?
Yes.
Mr. Horke?
Yes.
Mr. Johns?
Yes.
Dr. Kelleher?
Yes.
Mr. Maui?
Yes.
Mr. McCarty?
Yes.
Mr. Schmitz?
Yes.
Ms. Spalcherik?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we will hear that later in the evening. First item of business now is Town Run PUD.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Rachel Remenschneider with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you tonight is the Town Run PUD. The proposal is for approximately 27 acres at the northwest corner of 146th Street and Town Road. The PUD proposes a mixed-use development consisting of commercial, single-family homes, and townhomes. This item was introduced to City Council on October 11th, 2021, and had a neighbor meeting on Monday, October 25th. The summary of that meeting can be found in your exhibits. It received its public hearing on November 1st, and staff has received 3 additional public comments since the hearing, which have been incorporated into the exhibits for tonight. Matt Skelton of Church Hiddle and Antrim is here tonight to present the details of the project and the changes since the public hearing. He's available for questions, as am I, if you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Skelton.
Good evening, members of the Plan Commission. For your record, again, Matt Skelton with offices at 116 North Union Street here in Westfield. With me this evening is Dale Pfeiffer and Adam Hill, who is participating remotely with Lower Commercial, and John Isaacs with MI Homes behind me here. You're all familiar with the site now. In response to the comments that we received at our Plan Commission public hearing and in our numerous conversations with our neighbors to the west, we have made extensive modifications to the plan that was before you originally. Could you put up, yeah. We've got a couple of slides here. We've made substantial modifications in working with the planning staff in response to the comments that we received from you folks and also in working with our neighbors. As you may recall, I will, when it comes up here, I will just reference what we, can I borrow your, thank you. This is where we were when we met with you previously. We received a lot of great feedback from you folks. We have modified our proposal, as Pam had up on the screen earlier. This is hard to see at this scale, I'm sorry, but most notably, there's a lot of detail that has gone into planning the western buffer. We didn't have that information at the time we were before you last, and I'll cover that in a little bit of detail here towards the end. And then also, we've introduced a single-family component to further transition land use within this 26-acre site. So effectively, the land use transition really kind of begins here, and then the buffer here, which has been enhanced a bit since we have communicated with you last, is now buffering from single-family instead of townhome uses. One of the items that I would point out in introducing the single-family component here, the number of townhomes has, of course, been reduced in order to accommodate that. And also, most notably, probably the commercial buildings is reduced from, in the previous plan, we contemplated up to 6 development opportunities for commercial, and that has been reduced to 2 locations. Along with the single-family information that we have submitted, we have also submitted an extensive amount, sorry, this is a little touchy, amount of detail regarding the single-family elevations, single-family architectural standards, and also landscaping. And so just to put this into perspective, I'll scroll through a couple of these. These are all in your materials, of course. But these homes are comparable in quality and character to what you would see if you're familiar with Suffolk, which is immediately south of Kroger, the Kroger at 32 and Cary. The development standards that are proposed are they're about the same as the Suffolk, if not higher. In most regards. There may be an exception, but for the most part, they either meet or exceed the Suffolk standards. And the character and quality is very similar. Suffolk, they had some, the ones that are most visible are alley load, just like the interior area of this area here are all alley load homes that will face out. These are technically front-load homes, although the way that the homes are designed, the garages in kind of a neo-traditional sense they're recessed from the front elevation by, I think it's most of them are 20 feet, but we have a minimum of 15. So they're about 15 to 20 feet set back behind where the house is and connected by a breezeway to the home, which gives a really nice curbside experience for those homes. Same basic architecture, same quality. I will briefly cover here the buffer yard enhancements. Let me skip back to, you can see there's a lot of detail here that I'm unable to, if this were zoomed in, you'd be able to see it a little bit better. But we have a minimum distance of 105 feet from the property line to the nearest home. That's a minimum, some maybe more. There is a mound that is being provided along this property line that is a 6 to 8 foot mound. And in addition to that, there is it's not split rail, but like a railed farm fence at the neighbor's request is being installed along this edge of the landscaped area to discourage folks from entering this area adjacent to the neighbor, and we've agreed to do that as well. And I think that, and it's summarized in these materials. Sorry. There we go. And it's detailed in this exhibit showing the fence style. Also, it shows the area to be preserved here where we have pretty mature trees. There's a picture of it that was also provided in your materials. But it also shows the planting types that will be installed in some detail as a representative sample of a 100-foot lineal distance. And then in addition to that, we have committed to, you can't read it here, but we'll be meeting with the neighbors on site to determine specific locations of plantings prior to completing our landscape plan to make sure we're locating plantings in the most optimal places to fill any gaps or voids. And then in addition to that, we've included a cross-section exhibit that shows the berm and planting cross-sections along the buffer in the two areas. This is the area adjacent to the tree preservation area, and this is the rest of the entire remainder of the length of the buffer area. Also noteworthy, I don't have an exhibit for this, but we have, in reconfiguring the site, we've been able to reduce our need for a center signage, a pylon center signage. In the previous request, there were 2 of those requested, thinking one would be desirable on Town Road and one desirable on 146th Street. And there's just not a need for both of those, so the request has been reduced to one, a single one. And there's additional information included in the PUD ordinance that speaks to amenities, and the specific location for the centralized amenity areas are reflected on your concept plan. And there's one nestled here near the townhome area. There's also one here in the central amenity area amongst the walking loop around the pond. So we have received some comments from Plan Commission members, and thanks to the staff for helping to be the exchanger of information and the collector of information for us. That would lead us to believe that there may be some refinements that would make this desirable to some of the Plan Commission members that would prefer to weigh in, especially on the single-family components that are being introduced here. And we are fine with that. We would request maybe that this meeting be used as somewhat of a working session for us to seek input. There's a good portion of this site did not look the way it does this evening, and would be very interested in receiving your input on the single-family component specifically. We have wanted to underscore, we have really worked extensively and taken all of your comments to heart. We've worked with our neighbors extensively, and we think we have a good solution for the transition here, and would appreciate any guidance and input that you could provide that could get us to the finish line. We'd like to wrap up this project here before the end of the year if we can. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go through commissioner comments. I heard specifically from Councilor Spoljarek with some concerns. We'll go ahead and start with you tonight for this.
All right. And I will say I very much appreciate your attention to that buffer yard on the west side. That's been incredibly important. A few things I just want to say before I get into some meat of my comments, and I will actually provide you with the written, because a lot of them are pretty detailed, so I don't want to try and do that all tonight. So one of my concerns here is that this is too dense for the residential, I mean, in a multitude of ways. Looking at the townhome area, I mean, there's only 15 feet in between each structure instead of even the original 20. And you're asking for buffer yard standards to basically, or landscape standards to not exist there. There's very little, if anything, and they're all lined up. And there's no building staggering. They're all the same building, from what I can tell. It's just, I find it just kind of minimal and not very inviting. I realize what you have to deal with across the street in the other corner, and so that's going to be a challenge with so much commercial over to the east. But I think that whole area needs to be looked at. Even with the uses for the for the commercial. I have some concerns, especially with the medium-intensity retail and anything that could be more of a 24-hour kind of flavor here. The uses like office and the sit-down restaurant kind of thing is one thing, but if we start getting something that's of the higher intensity retail, that concerns me. So, get on some other stuff here. You have up to 182 housing units here, and your amenities are not at all what we would expect with that number of units. From what I can tell from your language on here, it's basically 2 seating areas that can just be benches and trellis. And that's pretty much it, besides the trail around the pond, from what it looks like. So I think that needs work. The products that you're offering for the single family concern me. From what I can tell, the elevations that you're providing, it looks like you're taking the alley load product, which is more of a almost detached townhome really, and making that into, you're basically just sticking the garage onto the side of that product that is actually more of a detached townhome. And I don't see how that's, I don't know, it doesn't fit in with this area. I realize that you have the buffer in the mound, and that is gonna help, but to have these small lots abutting what is this big lot to the west is just too much. It's not really a transition. It's still just pretty tight. I mean, overall, you're asking for over 7 units an acre on this parcel, and that does not include the commercial. So that's a lot. And I don't see anything for the anti-monotony. There's a lot of things that you actually exempt yourself from, like street trees, street frontage landscaping, things that say like masonry shall be as provided in the elevations, and except for a little bit on a column on one of the elevations, I see none. The sign, any signage, I think, this is kind of minor, but I think that there should not be lit signage available that's facing the residential. And with the way you have the wall signs, they could be fronting one of the other roads. So not Town Road and not 146th. That's just my start, and I have most of it written down, but I'll let other people talk. Thanks.
Yeah, the written comments would be helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll continue on with Dave Schmitz.
I was initially real pleased with the changes that you had made, because I thought in kind of going over what had been said at the prior hearing, you touched on most elements, I think, of what people had requested in terms of less commercial, introducing single family, introducing a product with a lower height against some of the surrounding properties. But then once you got to the detail, I was concerned with many of the things Cindy talked about, the architectural standards on the single family units. It seems like also with the townhomes, I don't know that it was the same number of buildings, but it kind of seemed like it just kind of shoehorned them in a different location. And I guess overall with the density, that I understand the need, you can justify a higher density than the surroundings because of your location next to the arterials, but I guess I'd like it less than it is. This may be all in here and I haven't seen it yet, but just some consideration on the corner lots, anything visible from the arterials that you're looking at basically four-sided architecture, at least you're looking at attractive facades if visible from the arterials. And honestly, I haven't gone through it to see those provisions, the anti-monotony.
Which area are you referring to?
Anywhere that's visible from the arterial, so I guess that,
So any structure, that's not a area-specific comment?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
And that is true, by the way, already for the commercial is defaults to the 32 overlay zone, which requires that.
So it covers it.
Yeah, and actually, I think you've seen all the elevations for the townhomes, and the single family is new, so that you may not have had a chance to look at that
That
yet.
can just be my oversight. But I guess I think, with the same number of townhomes, it just ratchets up the density so high that it's not quite where I would like it to be. But I do appreciate what the petitioner's done to make some progress and definitely listen to what was being said, maybe just not quite there yet. And I guess I wasn't really enamored with the single-family product that, just the standards there, and as Cindy said, it looked like it's just the same, you take a townhome, you make it detached, and you put a garage in back, or you slide it to the side of the building, it's the same stuff, same product, so I think that's about all I have.
Thank you. Mike Johns?
I'll try to be quick. I agree with pretty much everything Cindy and Dave have said. First of all, thank the petitioners for the changes that they have made and for trying to work with the neighbors to the west. Definitely have made some improvements to the plan as opposed to the way it was first presented. But I'm not a fan of the density here. I know that there's a similar product next to Kroger up by 32. I don't like that product either. If you go up there and take a look at that, the houses are so close together that you can't have grass between them. They have stone because the grass wouldn't grow because that's how close they are. And in my opinion, that's just too dense. And I'm also questioning the number of townhouses. I think there's 130 units there, and granted, we're at the intersection of two arterials. It would probably say we should have some townhouses there for transition purposes, but I just feel they're too dense, so. And I think we're kind of doing a disservice to the builder to the north, to the Epcon people, who I think really have done a wonderful job of putting their subdivision together. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Go to the opposite end here and continue with Andre Maui.
Well, still have a lot of the same concerns that you already heard. The density and not staggering the buildings in particular with the grid layout there, I thought was something that needed work, but pretty much all the same stuff you've heard. I like the attention on the western border where it's been given. The rest of it, I just have a lot of concern with the density and layout.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman.
Thank you. I wanted to echo a thank you for working with the lofters on the buffer. I do have a question though on that. There's a couple of numbers on this. One is 90, which appears that the 90 is really the buffer, not 105, because the 90 goes to the property line. I'm asking Matt if that's correct.
Well, not really.
Okay.
So 90 is common area, and then the remaining 15 feet is unoccupied buffer space. Similar to Epcon, I think they had 20 feet of planting and 40 feet of grassed buffer space. And so that's the 60-foot buffer that was provided to the north. This is 105. Of the 105, 90 is commonly owned, maintained, and the fence that is being installed is actually at the back of lots within the 15-foot buffer that's not able to be occupied by anything. So it'll remain open.
But it's their backyard.
Just,
I mean,
yeah.
there can be a swing set in it, there can be, right, in that 15 feet. Somebody's paying taxes on it, it's their lot.
And so, just like with the Epcon situation, it's 20 feet of landscaped area, and then, and that whole area is in a backyard. There is no commonly owned space. This is different than that. So it's 90 feet of, I mean, that additional 15 feet doesn't have to be included in a buffer, but we thought that would be a better solution, and I think the lofters like the idea of not being able to have any structures constructed in a buffer yard.
So they can't have a swing set or a playhouse in that 15 feet?
I am not familiar enough with those provisions in your ordinance to know, but no structure, nothing that would require any kind of inspection or a building permit would be permitted to be constructed in there, like a swimming pool or anything like that.
Okay.
So I don't know, I'm guessing a garden or something could be in there for sure, but I don't know about swing sets.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then I have some concerns also on the uses. I think others have touched on that. Specifically, the health and fitness center, which would be a business that would see traffic from very early in the morning to probably late in the evening. Anything like that would be very disruptive to the neighbors to the west with lights, headlights, just people coming and going. So I have to say that I'm not in favor of commercial on this parcel at all. I think that we set a precedent moving across to the west of town with commercial on this particular parcel. We have a huge parcel already zoned to the east, and I just have an overall concern of continuing to rezone for commercial and taking away from places that we've already intentionally zoned for commercial. So that's just my viewpoint on that, but if there is commercial, I certainly would want to see businesses that would not be disruptive to the neighbors. I'm also extremely concerned about the density, which has already been brought up. I pulled up Epcon's numbers earlier, and I believe they've got 90 units on 37 acres, so about 2.4 dwellings per acre. And I think Mrs. Spoljaric just said about 7 per right now. Those are all on the same kind of corner between 151st Street and 146th Street. So we have one neighborhood that's at 2.4 dwellings per acre, and then just this very, very dense proposal as we move south from that Epcon. And I know that others have already mentioned this, but I'm concerned about the amenities as well. We have potentially, so there's 182 units in this PUD. Let's say that's 500 people, and they have a couple of benches and a trellis for amenities. And I'm just not sure what we're doing here with this project. It just seems very dense with a lot of different uses, and it doesn't feel like a neighborhood to me. And I feel like in this particular area of our city, the comp plan really talks about neighborhoods. And so I just have an overall concern about how we're structuring this. And when you compare it to Epcon, they've got a pool, a pickleball court, a fitness center, a clubhouse, parkettes, trails. And then when we go to the Del Webb, which is just over to the north of Epcon, they have very similar amenities. And so those are really neighborhoods where you can see what the strategy is and what the living will be like in those areas. So I will also send you some written comments.
Thank you.
I'll just kind of wrap it up there, but I just want to echo my concerns on this right now. Thank you. I do want to also say one other thing and thank MI for including all the different elevations on the homes. I did really appreciate that, so we could see the sides and the rears. That's something that I would love to see on all of our PUDs with our housing elevations. So thank you to them for including that.
Thank you. Victor McCarty.
For the sake of time, everyone has pretty much said what I've been thinking throughout this whole presentation. The density, amenities, so on and so forth. To me, this updated plat just looks a little, I love mixed use, but just a little hodgepodge to it. Like Kirsten was just saying, what is the purpose of this development? I appreciate the reduction in townhomes and the reduction in the commercial building uses. But just again, when my eyes just go straight to the center of the development and line after line, I mean, you could almost nearly touch houses, it's 15 feet. I would just like to really see a reduction in density compared to what is already in the surrounding area. I would really like to thank you for working with the neighbors and working with the buffer. I think that is definitely a plus side for me. As long as neighbors are happy, I'm happy. But through comments that we've read from earlier today, we can tell that there's definitely some work still to do. Just one last comment when it comes to the pond. I appreciate that there's now more variety with that instead of just one straight line, so I appreciate that, and just a little bit more detail throughout the entire project in comparison to the little pond will be nice, so thank you.
And I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last comment.
The pond, just instead of it being like in the previous detail plan of it being a straight,
Got it.
yeah, it has more shape to it. So, yeah, more character throughout the project would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher?
Well, I agree with Cindy's comments and Kristen's comments, and I won't repeat them. The big problem here is the density. Without the density, you could be more creative. There could be more amenities. It could be more of a neighborhood. I think Kristen brought up the two neighborhoods to the north, which are very much neighborhoods where people engage and are proud of their neighborhood. I know Centennial and Village Farms are very much the same way. They are a community. They know each other. They do things together. And I think one of the things the mayor asked us to do was talk about long-term, how do we have a sustainable community? And for me, at least, neighborhoods are part of that, not just bedrooms for people to stay in. We need bedrooms and condos and townhomes, but I think we need to create more neighborhoods. The retail that we approved at Ditch was really not supposed to be there. What was supposed to be at Town Road and 146 was more local retail, and yet what we have on the northeast corner is certainly much larger than that. So I am also not particularly jumping up and down about putting retail on this. I would consider something like office. Again, something that was low-key, that was an 8 to 5 type of thing. I think that would fit in with the comprehensive plan. If that were to be done, it would have to be very small. And one of the concerns I have about your ordinance actually is on page 2. You show the concept plan, and these two commercial buildings are 12,000 square feet each. And yet on page 2 in your ordinance, it says the boundaries of the areas shall be developed in substantial compliance with the concept plan. But the final layouts and site plans within the areas will be subject to the terms of this ordinance and may vary from the descriptions shown on the concept plan. So that means these buildings don't necessarily have to be that size, the way this is worded. We're just talking, this isn't in substantial compliance with the concept plan. Only the areas are in substantial compliance. So that to me is a big issue, because in LB, a building can be 30,000 square feet with an aggregate of 90,000 square feet. And that's not what I think anybody is looking at here or imagining would be there.
And if these had more than, there's no way to have the buildings much larger than this and have parking. That is intended for a multi-story scenario.
Right, but I guess I say there's a bit of a loophole here that I'm sure you didn't intend, but I'd like to see it closed if there's gonna be any commercial there. Because we're looking at two 12,000 square foot buildings, and somebody could come and say, wait a minute, but your ordinance also says I could do 90,000 aggregate. And I might wanna configure what's in one of those other areas, so it's just.
Yeah, our
it's just
intention is not to exceed 30,000 per building.
30,000 per building? You
Yeah.
have 12,000 per building on the ones you're showing.
That's assuming it's a single-story building. If it was an office or something, it might have to have an additional floor.
Okay, I get it now. The other things that have already been mentioned, there's no street trees, there's no landscaping along Town Road or 146th Street. You may intend to do that, but it's not in the ordinance, so it doesn't have to be done.
And I think the buildings are up on the right-of-way line on purpose. So
Right.
all the parking is behind. And so it's really the foundation planting requirement is still, it's not exempted out from that.
Right, but there are no other, and I look at, as I drive along 146, and I look at, not Centennial, but whatever the other Estridge development is, those buildings are right up along the road, and it's really not very attractive. I mean, they kind of, you go along and you see some nice subdivisions and some plantings out front, and then you get to this wall, and I don't think that's what we intended 146th Street to look like in the comp plan. Certainly on the south side, and I will pass these out if everybody wants to take one, Shadow Wood is on the south side of 146th Street, and I brought that up last time. That's a Pulte development, it's an infill project, and they're single-family homes on small lots, but they're also one-story, and they're very nice, and that's what I would expect to see in the single-family area here. I think it would be consistent with the neighbors, with the comp plan, with preserving property values in the area. So I am pleased with your buffer yard. I don't have a big opposition to some townhouses along Town Road, because I think that's a good transition and buffer from the commercial. But I think the residential, you've got about way too many homes in there to achieve any kind of a neighborhood. And that, for example, these lots are 5,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet. That's no lot at all. Basically, that's a footprint for something. With a square footage for the first floor of 750 square feet. So while some of these homes are attractive in their own right, they're also shown as pictures with space on each side, and in reality, they're going to be right next to each other.
And
So
we can show you some representative samples, or you can drive through Suffolk. I mean,
Right,
it's the
right.
same theme. I mean, not everybody, as Mr. Johns pointed out, may not be everybody's subjective preference, but,
Right.
I mean, it's an intentional architectural
Right, right.
result. I mean, it
No,
was on
and I
purpose.
understand that. I just think that the density is just too high to achieve some other things that the comp plan talked about to make a neighborhood. It did talk about, for example, quality of a home is one thing, but to have the same quality home repeated and close to each other is not a quality development, and that's from our comprehensive plan. So it's not just the quality of an individual home, it's the quality of the whole development. So anyway, I will try to put my comments together and send them to you also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Deck?
Nothing beyond what's already been shared.
Thank you. I basically concur, for the sake of lack of repetition. I don't have much that I could think of to add, but I'm extremely sensitive to the densities, as has been brought up numerous times. My first impression when seeing the before and the after was this was a great change, and I think it still is a change in the right direction, but the deeper you look at it, the more these concerns really do come to light. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to take an additional meeting to work through this and come back in the future for final discussion or additional discussion and a recommendation. Are there any commissioners, now that you've heard from everybody else, that have additional comments? I see one hand at Kristen Berkman.
I'm sorry, I just had one other quick thing, Matt. Along the Del Webb, and I believe also Epcon, they've got a black four-board fence, and I think it would make a lot of sense to continue that look along Town Road, and perhaps along 146th Street as well. I don't recall if the lofters have a fence out there or not, so that one can be discussed, but I think specifically to make it look consistent all the way downtown, that would be a nice add.
Well, I'll discuss that. Thanks.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on the
I
left?
have one thing to ask. I know that you changed for the townhomes, the driveway from being 20 feet down to 10 feet. An average parking spot is at least 18 feet long, right? So where is somebody supposed to park?
So these are public streets, and so there is parking opportunities on public streets. They aren't narrowed streets. That's one. Secondly, the minimum parking requirement for single-family homes is 2 spaces per home, and the 2 spaces in the garage counts. But in addition to that, there is room for a car to park in the driveway, sideways in front of the garage of each one of those units.
So you're saying a car couldn't pull into a driveway, it would be sticking partway out in the street or over
No,
the sidewalk?
it would, each of them has a mandatory 2-car garage, and so it creates basically an outside of the right-of-way parallel space in every driveway. And I think this meets your ordinance requirement, does it not? I
Okay,
think.
we had
We're
a-
not asking to change that.
No, we had a subdivision years ago that had a driveway that was short. And when people parked in the driveway, like people normally park in a driveway, which is this way, not this way, the car went into the sidewalk area. So if someone
someone,
wanted to park that way in this one, they would be in the sidewalk area.
yeah, I mean, you can't control how people park.
Yeah, but I mean, if they did, what I'm saying is that it's
If the-
short, if they did
yes.
that.
Yeah.
And the problem with that was kids are riding down the sidewalk and then they have to go out in the street to get to the sidewalk.
And I
on
think
the
these
other
are all,
side.
these are all alley fed, except, yeah, they all really are. You can see where the sidewalks are planned within here, and you shouldn't have that conflict.
Okay.
I mean, we've tried to design around that problem. But I mean, the city's standards that apply to the townhome setbacks and parking, I mean, we have not sought to vary any of that.
I think Pam wanted to speak up.
Yeah,
I'll
go
be
ahead.
quiet.
No, I was just going to clarify that the 2 parking spaces in the garage do count for the minimum 2 parking spaces required.
I don't believe we have anything further to offer you tonight, so appreciate your openness to go through this a little bit longer to nail this a little better. And we'll see you back at a future meeting.
And could I just respond to maybe a
Oh,
couple
yeah, I
of
guess if
these?
you've
That's
got
okay.
something ready to go. We've
I
had
mean,
quite a
just,
bit of dialogue
just so
already.
I don't get a chance to talk to everybody, so I thought
Yeah.
I'd just do it now. There are landscaping standards that have been incorporated for each type of dwelling that have been incorporated into your PUD. So to say that, this isn't landscaped well, I mean, it doesn't show up on, if we tried to put it on here, you wouldn't see anything else. But there's definitely landscaping proposed and part of the ordinance for each type of dwelling, and each one of them there's a sample lot landscaping plan. The building staggering is an interesting item that I had not anticipated, frankly. The very nature of this is to create an enclave, a small enclave with some repetition for architectural form. And so that was very intentional. And so if that is something that we need to be looking at, then that's a much bigger discussion that may really drastically change the way this ends up looking, and it may not look better. So it's just a comment. I think that's something, we're going to have to continue that dialogue offline through your staff. And then the comment about the garages, these simply being the same type of home, except instead of being rear load, having the garage, they're actually more expensive homes, the ones with the front load garage. Those are wider lots, they're bigger lots, they're more expensive homes. And the architectural style of the home itself, very intentionally, was meant to have some continuity within the residential area, so you don't have, differing homes on the 2 sides of the same street. I mean, that was intentional. But just know that the garages, none of the garages, they're either alley fed in the center, or they're recessed garages that are really not, I mean, that's not very common to have a garage that is recessed back 15, 20 feet in a modern kind of conventional subdivision setting. And we're trying not to make this a modern conventional type of subdivision setting. And I think these were all repeats. Oh, there was a comment referring to this corner as being the same kind of corner as 151st in town. And I just, from a planning perspective, I just got to call that one because I don't think it's the same at all. These are, Town Road is the same road, but 146th Street is a much bigger obstacle from a market perspective than I think we'd like to believe. There are some things that want to be near that intersection, and there are some things you really don't want to be next to that intersection. I'm not saying you couldn't find somebody, if you wanted to build a single-family development there with some extensive buffering, and the buffering to the south is an extensive buffer. But I would say that there are market forces at work here, and if this project doesn't contain a certain mix of elements, there may not be a project. And so that's just kind of the practical reality behind, all of this. So that's what we're, behind the scenes, that's what we're trying to manage. In addition to coming up with a good plan, you have to have a market-worthy good plan. So.
May I respond to that?
Sure.
Because I think you were responding to my
Yeah, that's
point.
okay, that's okay.
Somehow Carmel was able to do it on the other side of the road.
Oh, I
And-
understand. Different, it may be a
And there's
different.
a beautiful neighborhood just to the west that Dries did. I believe it might have a Zionsville address, but it's lovely, right on 146th Street. We have lots of people that live along 146th Street, so I think with some creativity, it's workable. That's just my opinion, but I heard what you said.
Right.
I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, there's the market side of this too, so. All right, thank you.
I think we deserve everything Carmel has.
Let me jump in on that real quickly too. So this is an area where our comprehensive plan does call for local commercial. So I think that's part of the challenge in coming up with a plan here that is largely not local commercial. What is the right mix? What's the right density? I think every single one of you mentioned too dense. Well, there's really no guidance in the comprehensive plan for this part of our community regarding residential density. So to the extent we could give a little more specific feedback, I think would be helpful. So on that note, if for those that said you had additional comments, if we could have those to staff by the end of the day, Wednesday this week, so we can forward those on to the petitioner to keep on the timeline for the next meeting, that would be helpful.
Kevin?
Yes.
I will get those to you. The comprehensive plan also is not law, as you always state, and we have modified it on the other side of the street, so I think they're.
I understand that, but when that happened, this area was also not modified to reflect that change, so I'm not sure.
Right, but we don't do that.
I understand.
So I
But the
think.
people that are reading our comprehensive plan are seeing this as local commercial, so I think we should expect local commercial petitions.
Oh, I'm not objecting
Right.
to that. I'm saying that it is a guide and not an ordinance, and sometimes things change between the time it was written and now, and they need to understand that our comments are not that we are against some kind of commercial there, but that things have changed, and the other things that we pay attention to, like property values and the best use, are other issues that go into play here, so that's all.
No, I understand, which is why I think we need more direction than normal on this one, because I think there's
Right.
been some changes.
And I don't know if you've got a copy, but I did give the brief thing on Shadowwood to everybody. And I
not.
made 9-10 copies, so there should be one for staff. But
Thanks.
you can get on Carmel's website and read. It's a 180-page PUD, so I didn't copy the whole thing.
Matt, one thing that might help, just as a good place to start, in looking at the underlying, what you're trying to do, like SF4, make it closer to SF4. Do you know what I mean? Almost every standard, you've cut it a lot, or said a standard doesn't apply. And I think we might get closer to something that would be approachable to being reasonable if we got closer to that and just didn't exempt out everything and
And
diminish those
we
standards.
really modeled this to, I've only received until tonight positive reinforcement about Suffolk. And so this was modeled to create Suffolk. And so it really doesn't matter what the underlying zoning is if you know where you're trying to land. And so the purpose of the SF4 and the PUD you have before you is really, functionally, it's a backstop. If there were something missed, it would revert, the underlying reversion would be probably at a higher bar than anybody would really want it to be, but it just forces another discussion and to address those issues with this body and then the council if it had to be addressed. And I can't even imagine what one of those things would be, but let's just say it was a setback or something. Well, if something isn't adequately addressed in the PUD, then it defaults to SF4. And that's probably, a higher bar than what would functionally, work here. Maybe, I don't know. But that's, you understand, I mean, that's kind of the purpose, that's the intention of the underlying zoning district. But I understand what you're saying. You're saying if we proposed SF4, we may not be having this discussion.
Correct, yeah.
And I really suspect that doesn't work, or we would have proposed it. I mean, financially, but we'll put our thinking caps on. We've done it before. And thank you all. I mean, I know this is tedious for you too, and you don't get paid as much as the rest of us do to do this, so thank you. I also know that Kevin is really trying, and his team are trying to be good conduits of information, but it is a big challenge trying to have a discussion with this many people, through these folks. They're good at it, but I'm just saying it's been a challenge, so, but we're gonna keep at it, so thank you.
Matt, can you hear me?
All right, moving on, the next item on the agenda is the one that has been withdrawn, so that takes us to South Park Industrial, where we previously approved the waiving of our rules.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, Caleb Ernest with the Community Development Department. This proposal is for the overall development plan review of one lot on approximately 3.5 acres in the South Oak PUD district. This project is located at the address of 16465 South Park Drive. It is approximately west of the Monon Trail and east of Oak Ridge Road. This item is up for a public hearing tonight. Don Humphrey of Total Engineering Solutions is here representing the project, as well as Joe Fritz, the owner. They plan on making a brief presentation tonight and are available for questions, as am I, should you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. As Caleb mentioned, I'm Don Humphrey. I work and own a company called Total Engineering Solutions. We're the civil engineering on the project. We're here on behalf of the potential owner, but the developer, which would be CTCO2 LLC, which Joe Fritz is the president of that company. So as Caleb said, what this is, basically, it's about a 3.7 acre site. It's part of the South Oak PUD. It's an undeveloped lot. It was originally planned and master planned as part of the South Oak. So we're obviously meeting both the city of Westfield ordinance as well as the original PUD ordinance. Our proposal is to put up two buildings. They say commercial buildings, but in fact they're intended to be for light manufacturing type facilities. Each building 21,000 square feet. As you can see from the plan, the buildings would face the front. There would be some small office areas that would face the front. The parking lot would be in the front. Any of the truck loading. Obviously, in this type of facility, you'll have not a lot of trucks, but you will have need for truck docks and so forth. We basically have those coming inward so that they're not as visible from either, the fronts. And then it's set up to potentially be divided into as many as two spaces for each building. This won't be necessarily a multi-tenant, but it is planned that, to have some flexibility that each building at 21,000 square feet could be broken up into two if need be. So it's kind of planned. That's why the parking lots are separated. If need be, they could have as many as four customers in here. But other than that, it's a basic, development of the 3.7 acres. The intent is to kind of match what's out there now. The detention and so forth isn't necessarily on site as part of the master plan. I think if you go back to the site, there's a pond off to the right, to the east of us, that's was originally sized there off of the Monon Trail. Ironically, the pond to the west of us is actually, we believe, part of the subdivision and not part of the South Oak. So all of our drainage and so forth is in there. The development of the buildings would be similar to those that are around it that are also part of the South Oak. So nothing too complicated, but just trying to make good use of a vacant lot that's was planned 4 years ago and just never developed. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
This item is in front of us for a public hearing, so we'll
Yes.
move on to the public hearing, then we'll go ahead and see
Okay,
if there are any comments and go through commissioner comments and get your responses.
sure thing.
Open the public hearing for this at 8:02 PM. Do we have any cards for folks present?
I have no cards, thank you.
For anybody attending virtually that is inclined to want to comment, we do have a taker in the audience. But quickly type to us at planners@westfield.in.gov and get your comments to us so we can consider them during the course of this meeting. But go ahead and proceed. State your
Thank you.
name and address for the record.
Yep. Good evening, Robert O'Brien. My property is the south of the outlying property. It's a horse farm, approximately 37 acres. I have two requests. The first one is the developer to the west was accommodating in putting a fence across the property line, the south boundary. And so I would request that that fence be continued along this development. And the second request would be, there is a significant mound of dirt on this property. And there's nothing in the plan that gives us any clarification as to what's going to happen with that dirt. Our good neighbors to the east, Duke Energy, when they put forward their elevation drawings, it was accepted and we accepted it as neighbors. However, when the excavating people came, they moved dirt around such that it increased the size of the height of the building by a total story. And I'm concerned what's going to happen with this large amount of dirt that's sitting on this property. My second request would be for consideration to move that mound to become, that pile of dirt to be added to the buffer mound along the south property line, and then the landscaping to go on top of that. Other than that, I've looked at all this. I like the detail on elevations, but I'm also looking forward to clarification on what the uses will be. As many of you recall, we were presented with a plan once before that had truck loading facing the south, which is unacceptable. It was not acceptable in the PUD before, and if they're going to stand by their word to follow the existing PUD, then there should be no truck entrances facing an SF1 property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Linda Nass, 1122 East 161st Street, and we are the neighbors to the east of Mr. O'Brien's property, and we've been working on this since 2002, 2003, 2019, and here we are again. Our concerns are, and Bob brought up one that's very specific, because our properties were at grade level with this land behind us, which were farm fields, and now we're very much down from this, so the water, even with drainage back there, the water still runs onto our property and affects our large trees back there. So we're concerned about that. The landscaping plan presented, I would like to have looked at. There don't seem to be any large evergreen trees. It seems to be arborvitaes, which don't get very wide. We have them on our property too, so we know how big they are. But behind the Duke Energy, which is next to the pond to the right in that picture, they built up and they put block there, and then they put their evergreens on top, and they're quite large now, and they do, disguise that building as you're looking there. The fasteners company next to there, they just have a few evergreens, and some have died, and so there's not much masking what they have, and we're concerned with the landscaping plan that's noted here that we have a copy of. The next thing is that the trash containers, they're showing in this depiction that it will be up along their back property line where their building is, and I realize there's a buffer there and all, but originally this is in the southern area, and trash was not allowed on the back of the property lines. Duke has theirs within their, off to the side there. And what the fastener company did was they built it in the front with their loading dock, and it was perfect until they decided to build that driveway to the back parking lot. And now that is right back on the corner of our property. Because the back of Bob's and ours could eventually develop residential, because you see the street button Bob's. You wouldn't want those trash containers and the trash trucks so close to the property line. That wasn't allowed in the original PUD if you look at the southern area. So landscaping would affect that too. We're not sure where the lighting's going to go on this building. We didn't get a drawing of that. Duke doesn't have a whole lot of lighting on the back. All we see is when the trucks come in and they go out, we can see the headlights at our house, which is way up front. And the fastener company just has one little light on the back of the building. We're not sure what's going to go behind here. The lighting that was in the ordinances that we had in place when this was passed in 2003 may be different from what they are today, but we'd like to make sure that it's shielded and they don't shine into our properties. And the elevations, if you could explain when you present this better, where is north on these elevations? And we got one page of elevations, and are those mirrors and images? One will be on the right, one will be on the left. We weren't sure about that. Do the loading bays, do they have down ramps, or are they on level ground? We weren't sure of that either, so we just like to have some of those questions answered. We have not spoken with this prospective buyer and developer of this, or builder of this. Okay, that's all I need. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we received any emails? No.
We have not.
Okay, ample time has passed. I will close the public hearing at 8:09. And we'll go around with commissioner comments, starting with Dave Schmitz.
When the petitioner responds, I was a little confused by, as Ms. Nass just stated, the renderings and the north issue, and these are labeled side, end. Wasn't clear, and then seeing that there's, from a scale standpoint, the buildings seem much shorter in the rendering, so I just didn't understand how this all fit together. Beyond that, I think the public comments given the petitioner some things to address, but that's really all I have.
Thank you. Mike Johns?
Say, I would just agree with what's been said so far, particularly comments regarding the buffering at the back. I think it's important that it is mounded in the back, and that there are evergreens planted back there to try to hide the facility. Yeah, that's my only comments.
Thank you. Andre Maui?
No comments that we didn't just hear already.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman?
I just want to echo the buffering for those neighbors. And also, I think that the point about the lighting is important as well, because that can really be a problem for residents to have lighting coming into their backs of their homes and that type of thing. So if there can be attention to that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Mike, Victor McCarty?
When we, excuse me, when we have a project that was approved many, many years ago and comes back to us many, many years later, we need to make sure that we just cross our T's, dot our I's, make sure everything is taken care of, aforementioned the buffering and the lighting, et cetera, to make sure, again, we continue to be good neighbors. So just please take their comments into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher?
I was on the Plan Commission when we wrote this PUD, and this was written, and this is, I'm addressing the petitioner so that you understand. This was written with several different areas for industrial. The center area was to be more intense. The Monon area, which is along the eastern border, was a little bit different. And this is the southern border, which will be along a subdivision someday. As you could see from that one picture, there's a road there, and that will be developed eventually. So we tried to be both open-minded in allowing this to be industrial, but yet being sensitive to the different areas that that it butted up against. And so in the day, we referred to our UDO, our zoning ordinance. We have a list of uses that were allowed in the Monon area, in the internal area, and in the southern area. I don't know if you have that list or not. Hopefully it was supplied to you.
Yes.
Great, because I didn't want you to do something and then find out it wasn't permitted. So, and lighting and landscaping are also in that. They refer to our old UDO. Unlike newer PUDs, they refer to the old references, and your landscaping along the southern border wouldn't be in compliance. And staff report may have said this, but at the time for this PUD, it followed the ordinance that said 1 evergreen tree every 30 feet and 3 evergreen shrubs every 30 feet. So we need to follow the actual PUD from back in the day and not look at our new UDO and say, oh, this is the landscaping now, because it referenced our old zoning ordinance. So I just want to make sure that, and Pam has something to say.
Landscaping was reviewed under the old zoning ordinance.
And the PUD?
Yeah, yes, this PUD attached actual copies of the old zoning ordinance in the relevant chapters.
Right. But in there, it says that the landscaping along the southern border would be 1 evergreen and 3 evergreen shrubs every 30 feet.
Okay. Is it along the southern border?
Yeah, if you go into, I don't have the original PUD, but.
Yeah, and I've got the original PUD open. Within buffer yards, at least 1 evergreen tree per 30 linear feet and 5 evergreen shrubs per 30 linear feet shall be planted.
The southern area, yeah, so I want to make sure. It's very confusing to go through that old PUD because it has our old zoning ordinance and then it has some verbiage in the PUD, and so it kind of gets all jumbled together, but I want to make sure that we're following that. Because at least on the rendering, it doesn't show any evergreens on that southern border.
And it may not comply at this time. That would have been a
Right,
comment if
so-
it doesn't.
So all I want to make sure is I welcome you to the community. I think it's a great industrial subdivision, and you'll be very happy there. I just want to make sure that you don't get started and then find out in this old PUD, there was something that you go, oops, maybe I shouldn't have done this, or, that's all I want to do. I want to make sure that we are taking care of you as well as the neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Deck?
Just that it's great to see something being done with this lot. It's been empty for a while, so yes, welcome to Westfield. And the concerns and questions that have been raised does not seem terribly insurmountable, and I think with just a little discussion, you can certainly accommodate and come to an agreement, so thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Cindy Spoljarek?
All of my comments are saying that they're outstanding in the staff report, so I'll just wait to see those. Thank you.
Okay. Not too much new to add. I understand why the elevations are shown as ends and side, because they're two identical buildings. So on one, east is east, but it's west on the other, and vice versa. So it does get a little confusing. It does appear that above doors and windows, there were little black rectangles that I interpreted as likely being lighting. That may or may not be accurate, but that appears to be the only lighting. I didn't see anything on the rest of the lot, but it would sure seem like there must be something else there. So it's something that we'd want to be sure and know more about. Are there responses to any of the comments that anybody would like to bring from the team? Actually, I never closed the public hearing. It's now
Yeah,
closed.
for sure. I'd be glad to address some of the comments. As far as landscaping, yeah, we obviously will meet whatever the minimum is and then go and see what else needs to be done. And as far as the south area, yeah, well, we are aware that each of them had a little difference. So as far as what goes there, we're aware of that. And as far as the landscaping being a little different on the southern, if we need to mound it or plant additional trees or whatever, I'm sure we can work that out. To answer some of the questions, as far as the lighting goes, there's no parking lot lighting proposed. There'll be some wall packs. They're all down lights. It's mainly just for especially along the front where sidewalks and parking areas are. We'll obviously not be shining any lights. I'm sure you guys have ordinance like everybody else does. We'll do photometrics to show that there's no lights crossing our property lines, no specific lights up high, broad. They're all down lights. They're all wall packs. That's about all that's really planned. So while not all of them may be shown on this drawing, you are correct. Some of those over top are the lights at the doors. There may be some additional along the fronts of the buildings, but all of them are wall packed down lights, so they don't give off, 10 feet away from the building. There's hardly any light left. So they're mainly for access around the building. As far as the truck docks, you asked that, they will be recessed. The floor of the building will only be a foot or two higher than existing grade out there now, and so those truck docks will actually be recessed.
And the dirt, if anybody would like dirt, we got plenty. We'd love to have it gone. But that was our intention, was to go along with it. We're assuming that it's all topsoil, so.
Yeah, there is, believe it or not, on the site, because before the storm sewer is put in, there is a swale through there, which is where a lot of your water comes from. And what we'll tell you is it should be better, not worse, because everything within our site will be contained and taken to the pond. So whatever runs across this lot into your lot now, 90% of that's going to be gone, because all of it's going to be diverted into the pond, and not, even though it will increase because of the pavement, it will be diverted and not go onto your property anymore. So some of that dirt it'll be leveled out, but in our grading plan, there's probably not 2 or 3 feet of elevation difference across this whole site. There will definitely not be, the buildings aren't going to stick out of the ground 5 feet. They're probably maybe 2 or 3 feet higher than South Park Road, and that's just to get everything to drain away from it, but nothing exaggerated at all. And I think that was most of the comments.
And I'm a commercial contractor too. I remember working with Shannon Dorr in '07 on this. And then I remember probably 4 years ago working with Andrea, I think was his name. So I've watched the site just never being able to be developed. And so.
Well, welcome. You know what's going
Yeah, I
on
was
there.
just
and
going to
we
say, 4
appreciate
years ago,
that.
he was going to be the builder for the owner. Now he's buying the property and doing it himself, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, our next public hearing is Casey Corner, 2112-ODP-27 and 2112-SPP-26. Staff
Thank you.
report, please.
For the record, Rachel Remenschneider with the Community Development Department. The proposal is for the overall development plan and primary plat of 80 lots on approximately 11 acres in the Spring Mill Trails PUD district. This project is located east of Ditch and west of Casey Road. It is up for a public hearing tonight and has been properly noticed and advertised. Staff has received no public comments on this matter. John Dobashewitz of Nelson and Frankenberger is here tonight to make a brief presentation. He and I are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask you to advance, or if I can take it? Thank you, staff. Good evening. My name is John Dobashewitz. I'm a land use professional with the law firm of Nelson and Frankenberger, and we represent the petitioner, Platinum Properties. And with Platinum this evening here on their behalf is Tim Walter and Steve Edwards. Rick Ellis, the project engineer, as well as Jim Schinover, is also available if there are any questions. As noted, in the matter before you this evening is the overall development plan and primary plat for Casey Corner. As noted in the staff report, Casey Corner is the plan for the Spring Mill Trails PUD area that was amended earlier this year in September with approval from the council permitting townhome development on the site rather than multifamily apartments. Not to be redundant, the real estate's located between Casey and Ditch Road at the roundabout there that's just north of State Road 32. Hey, could you advance to the next slide, please? Thank you. The approved text amendment permits the development of for sale residential townhome community consisting of 80 lots. The builder will be Lennar Homes. Lennar, it's a two-story product, as you see from the illustrations on the right-hand side of the screen. This is a product that isn't currently being constructed today in Westfield, so it'll be new to the community. The images on display are included as those on the site plan for the community. As shown, homes will front Ditch Road. So I got my pointer here, I can walk us through that. So these homes that you see in yellow will face Ditch Road, and they'll have the front door on the side facing Ditch Road with the garage on the interior of the site, so those garage doors don't face Ditch Road. Those homes internal to the site, in particular along Casey Road, are what are identified as a front load product, and you see that right here where the garage and the front door are on the same side, but again, the garage doors face away from Casey Road to the interior of the site for those types of units that are identified there. Again, there's no garage doors that face toward the exterior of the site, whether that's Casey or Ditch Road. Can you advance to the next slide, please? This illustration is of the exact engineered development plan that we're seeking your consideration of this evening. It's the overall development plan for the site, which is reflective of the improvements presented and agreed to at the time of zoning. One thing I would like to draw to your attention are two waivers that we'll return back to the Plan Commission with at your next meeting. One in particular of particular importance. The cul-de-sac length, as you see here, this is a typical matter that we, after zoning, we obtain support from Public Works, and it returns back to the Plan Commission at the time of development plan review as a waiver request, and we have support from engineering. And in addition to that waiver, it would be the application of the multifamily amenity standards, and I'd like to explain that. At the TAC meeting for the development plan, now that it's the time of zoning, staff reviewed the plans for compliance with the multifamily amenity standards rather than the single-family standards, which came to us as a surprise to us. We did present at the time of the zoning approval that this subdivision of only 80 lots wouldn't have typical amenities that would be rather applied to multifamily development. Again, we converted from approximately 150 multifamily to 80 single-family homes because the neighborhood of this side couldn't support typical amenities that would be in a larger subdivision. However, as I indicated, it came to a surprise to us. We contacted staff as we anticipated single-family standards would apply, and staff's in agreement, and I know that Kevin and Pam and Rachel can confirm this, but staff's in agreement that there is some confusion regarding the UDO as it pertains to the single-family attached designation and the application of multifamily standards. However, even though that they're in support of the request, we did discuss staff making an administrative determination that those standards should apply, and staff correctly so determined that it was appropriate for the approval to be evidenced in as a waiver in front of the Planning Commission. that we would ask for your consideration this evening, as staff's in full support of that request, rather not this evening, but in advance of adoption or approval consideration at your next meeting. There was some discussion about waiting until the 20th, your next meeting, to review this, but ultimately we agreed to forecast for the Plan Commission that waiver, so that if there are any questions regarding that, we could get them out in front of us this evening. With that, I'll conclude. We appreciate your time tonight. Would remain available to address any questions that you have. And at the conclusion of tonight's meeting and post the public hearing, we'd continue to work with staff until we return back to you. We'd anticipate doing that on the 20th. But that's only in the event that we would resubmit Friday and everything else is all the I's dotted and T's crossed. One thing, based on some previous comments that we heard, I just wanted to highlight as part of the plan. There's a variety of both 5 and 4 dwelling buildings here, where 6 is permitted in the ordinance, so they went with a pattern that was smaller buildings, fewer units per building, rather than 6-unit buildings across. So you'll see a combination of 4 and 5-unit buildings. With regard to parking and offsets, there's a minimum 20-foot setback beyond the sidewalk, so you have adequate room for 2 cars in the garage and 2 in the driveway, every single unit. The driveway depths are longer in other cases, so you might be able to actually have 2 cars head-to-head in the driveway in addition to the garage. That's on rare occasions at the end of the cul-de-sacs here where you see the larger driveways. And really the geometry of the site and the positioning of the roadway really gives us that offset, and I think it's going to be a really great appearance as you drive down Casey Road to see the buildings framing the right-of-way with no garages. And as part of the zoning process, we did agree to a combination of materials on all elevations. So there's masonry on all 4 sides of all the dwellings, whether that's interior to the site or along the perimeter. We can go back to the other slide, but I know we're not here to focus on architecture, but it's the overall development plan. But I just wanted to remind everyone of those discussions that took place, and would be glad to receive your comments now or at the conclusion of the public hearing.
Thank you. We will open the public hearing at 8:27 p.m. Do we have any cards?
We
or
do not.
emails?
We do not.
Okay. We'll hold briefly for any potential emails from people attending virtually. Once again, the email address is planners@westfield.in.gov. Please type quickly and get your comments to us if you have any, and we'll hold. It's now 8:29. If we have not received any emails, I will
We have not.
close the public hearing. Are there any commissioner comments to this presentation tonight from Mike Johns?
Just a couple quick questions. The waiver for the cul-de-sac, is that for the length of the cul-de-sac? Is that?
It is. It exceeds 600 feet, which is the typical length.
All right, okay, that's what I thought, okay. I wanted to really kind of thank the petitioners. I like the mix of the 4 and 5 unit buildings. I think that works out really well. I like the way it's plotted. Is this product, you mentioned Lennar, and there's nothing in Westfield like this. Is this similar to the product that's in Whitestown? Do you know?
I apologize, Mr. Johns, I'm not familiar with the product in Whitestown. A similar product that was initially developed in Noblesville, if you have an opportunity, There's a community that's on the south side of the Midland that has a few of these buildings in it. At that location, Midland Overlook is the name of the community, and the cross streets, if you know where the PSI industrial facility is, if you turn down that street, you'll see it from that street, and I apologize, I don't remember the name.
My only comment is I think it's a pretty good job for an infill subdivision. And
Thank you.
it's the right, in my opinion, the right product for this particular location. So that's my only comments.
Thank you. Andre Maui?
Yeah, I like the garages loading from the interior of the site as well, and whether by choice or just accommodating the layout of this area, it's nice that the buildings aren't aligned, other than there's 3 in one row and only in one spot with that as well. So it just kind of is some nice character there. The waivers, I have no concerns about the cul-de-sac length. Of course, given that you have engineering support, I can get behind that. The one about the amenities, though, I'm not as quick to accept that. I just need to think about that a little bit. To me, the need still exists. I mean, the fundamental reason for the amenities, when you have families in a relatively dense area, which, you know, on an area basis, this may not be quite so much as a multi-family building per se, but it seems like there could still be a need, and I guess I'm interested in hearing more of the thoughts and the logic behind omitting that altogether. Other than that, this looks great.
Want me to go?
Just waiting for a response.
Oh,
John
okay.
was
Well,
prepared to go ahead and,
Initially, it was, amenities came up as a discussion that we had at the time of zoning, and we explained that we weren't going to provide a typical amenities. I think Mr. McCarty had a question. He just wanted to confirm that this neighborhood wouldn't participate in the other pool amenities to the north, which that area is confined to the single-family homes to the north. One of the amenities that are being provided that's creditable under the ordinance is the construction of the path. The applicant had considered, outside of the zoning requirement, to do a fitness trail and have professional fitness equipment along that trail, as well as benches that were adjacent to the pond as a consideration, but there wasn't an idea of accommodating anything larger than that, like a pool facility or a playground, which is specified under the ordinance. Again, it came as a surprise to us that there was the application of the multifamily standards where it's not a requirement in the single-family district. So we're trying to get to where we all thought we were supposed to be at the conclusion of the zoning phase, and also be respectful and accommodating. The questions may come up, and that's why when I talked to Platinum, they said, here's things that we had contemplated but aren't part of the zoning process today. The benches and the fitness trail.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback on that, there was, especially given the conversation during the zoning petition about amenities, there was certainly no, it really honestly just didn't cross anybody's mind that SFA, which is the underlying zoning district here, falls under the classification in our UDO as a multifamily district. It hasn't come up really before. This isn't really something that we've really had to think about or consider, and going through the next level of review at the development plan, which is where we are today, that's when this issue kind of, arose, came to our attention, that is something that we need to be more mindful of as we move forward with projects, townhome projects specifically, using the SFA distinction as their underlying district. How do we address amenities in those situations? Because if we were to just remain as a default, it would have to follow the multifamily amenity requirements. So we would have to consciously modify that in the PUD if that's the desire. So this is kind of a lesson learned for us as a community. It's, again, nothing we've really had to deal with before. So here we are.
If we take, and I'd have to dig into and understand SFA a lot better, but if we take a swing set as an example, what would be allowed or disallowed for a family who wanted to place a swing set?
I don't know that we have covenants and restrictions fully prepared yet, but no accessory buildings would be permitted on the site, so somebody couldn't have yard barn or anything like that. I don't know what they'll do in terms of permissibility of a swing set like that. I can find out what their thoughts are.
Because it would be one thing to have that in the rear yard's interior versus what would then be the front yards out toward Ditch Road, you know, it's a,
I think we're gonna, the answer is gonna be that it would be disallowed to be along Ditch Road. To tag on to Kevin's comment about that, when he and I spoke, Kevin, he was like, we, Nelson and Frankenberger, when we're in front of the Plan Commission, we're talking about zoning discretion and approvals. I would have made a significant presentation about amenities had we planned those, because we want to get credit for it. And I think what Kevin's trying to say, and I don't want to put words in mouth, this is no bait and switch. This is a staff, and I don't want to say staff. I take full responsibility for us not papering it the correct way, but we're asking for the Plan Commission's indulgence because we need to get it papered the right way. And Kevin wasn't comfortable in making an administrative determination. He wanted it evidenced as a waiver in front of the Plan Commission for posterity, if nothing else.
which I appreciate. I think it's the right approach. I thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman.
I mean, is it possible to do what you were contemplating on the trail at this point, or?
Yes. The answer is yes, and we'll reduce it, and we can reduce it to writing and present it to staff and bring it to our next meeting.
Okay, so you are planning on doing the fitness equipment along there
That was
some of those things?
That was something that we're meeting behind the scenes with our client and coming up with what are you planning on doing, and then they said, well, we were planning on doing this, but it wasn't part of the presentation we made because we didn't think it was a zoning requirement. And I said, well, then we should put it on the table for consideration in light of the situation we're in today. And so we'll take the site plan and we'll identify the spots where things occur and give you a list of what's being provided.
Okay.
That still may not achieve the minimum number of amenities that multifamily would normally require, so just keep that in mind. While yes, it sounds like they're committing to a certain amenity, it may check one or two boxes, but not the three that are needed given the size of this project. So the waiver may still be in place, the request may still be in place.
Right.
Just make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, the waiver would definitely be necessary, but attached to the waiver would be an exhibit that says, here's what we are doing.
I think that's a great collaboration of trying to solve this. So I think that's fantastic. And I just wanted to thank you again for facing everything along Ditch Road. I think that's going to make a really nice presentation. So, and I'm glad to hear people can park in their driveways. Thanks for letting us know that.
We do listen when we're in the audience.
Thank you. Victor McCarty.
So yeah, I'll just agree with Kristen there that I appreciate the layout of the corner here. I think it'll be much nicer than what was initially intended for the area, as well as less dense, and just add some character / variety to what is already existing around there. But going back to the amenity topic, as someone who is very in tune with all the amenity issues with the Spring Meadow Trails PUD, I voted yes on this project, fully aware that there would not be any amenities on this because, again, of all the issues that we've had regarding our own amenities. I would be very careful. I mean, I'll just be blunt honest. I'll be very careful about adding any athletic amenities along the trail just because of all the vandalism that we've had with our own amenities. So, I mean, yes, it would be nice to have, but at the same time, will in the future the residents of these townhomes be paying to replace them? It's a very high possibility because we've already had to, we had kids jump our fence for our pool house and blow up the fire extinguisher inside one of the bathrooms, and the bathroom had to entirely be redone because of sinks being broke and everything else. So I think this is a nice little pocket of these townhomes will be self-responsible for themselves, and I think the less that they will have to incur in the future, I think the better because of all the headaches that we've had to incur otherwise. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher.
Just want to say thank you. I know this didn't start off this way. There were some modifications made. I think they're good ones. 48 acres and 78 homes is a nice density, if you will. for this infill project. Everybody has some space around them. I like the creativity and the 3 and 4 units that give you some less monotony. So anyway, I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Deck,
Just thank you, nice job, looks good.
thank you. Cindy Spolcharik,
Just a few things. On the primary plat, and I don't know if it makes a difference right now, but there's no labeling for 1103. I'm looking at the detail there, and I'm like, it's page 6. And I noticed it specifically, and I don't know if this is something that fully impacts the project, but when we were,
We'll get it fixed.
yeah.
It's just a drafting error.
Yeah, I just wanted to point it out so you know. So when we looked at the concept plan on this, and this is, I guess, substantially, fitting that, there was a little bit more common area, it seemed, between these end units. And there was room for a bit more landscaping, and this is showing the trail right up on
The
those
challenge,
units.
the challenge there, and the reason I used the color exhibit is, these are the dimensions of the lot. So what you don't see on that is position, the dwelling, where there's actually area behind the dwelling to that lot line. Not as significant, but there are patios on some of the units have exterior patios, and others have patios that are sunk in or recessed into the first floor. So there's a combination of those two types. And that's why if you jump to the color illustration, it gives you a better idea. It's all 100% common exterior maintenance, so there's not my yard, your yard.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about visually. There was more space at the
So
southern end
a
of the
setback
project
here,
for buffer.
and the setback in particular right here, if you jump to the black and white plan, that had to line up square because of the easements here and the emergency access that the fire department required out to Ditch Road.
Right, and then also you had a 4-unit building and not a 5 across the street from that.
Yep,
site.
and that changed, the 4 units up here rather than a 5, and the 5 units is down here. So we flip-flopped the 2 dwelling type buildings.
I understand why you did it, but at the same time, it just provides less area there, if you will, and less potential for landscaping to be there like you had in the concept, just at the very south end of the cul-de-sac.
And the plan still conforms with the landscaping requirements, but I acknowledge your comment. There's a difference between the two.
And it does seem like then that path is going to be right up on those units there. Is that the case?
There'll be a separation for building dwelling landscaping adjacent to the unit, but the path will be, along this unit, the path will be closer than it was anticipated under the concept plan. On the dwelling unit here, it was squared up and lined up, and there's a 20-foot required setback from the south property line.
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Dave Schmitz,
Nothing additional, thanks.
very good. I have nothing further to add as well. So look forward to seeing you back at a future meeting.
We're going to target the 20th, and if not, then the 18th of January. So we're going to work hard on the 20th.
Very good, look forward to it.
Thank you.
Last public hearing tonight is the Springwater PUD, 2112-PUD-29.
Thank you. For the record, Rachel Remmenschneider with the Community Development Department. The item presented before you this evening is the Springwater PUD. The proposal is for approximately 49 acres on the east side of South Union, north of 161st Street. The PUD proposes a residential development with both townhomes and single-family homes while preserving the existing residence and store. This item had a virtual neighbor meeting on Wednesday, December 1st. The summary of that meeting can be found in your exhibits. The project is here for a public hearing this evening and has been properly noticed and advertised. Staff has received 3 public comments, 2 of which have been incorporated into the exhibits. One comment was submitted after 5 o'clock and was emailed to the commission during this meeting. Justin Moffett of Old Town Designs and representatives from Apollo Developers are here to present the details of the project. They are available to answer any questions, as am I, if you have any for staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Justin Moffett with Old Town Design Group. With me here tonight, Ed Hamilton and Neil Garadia, in the second row, with Apollo Developers. They are serving as Old Town's joint venture partner and helping lead the land development exercises here. And Bob and Michelle Beauchamp sitting behind me, who are partners in the project with us. I think many of you are familiar with this property, as the Beauchamp family has operated an antique business here for many years now. It's on South Union Street, adjacent and just east of the upcoming Lantern Commons development. I'm going to see if this will let me through. Just high level here, just give you a sense of location of the property. Bottom left, you'll see US 31 and 161st Street. So this property, the bulk of it is just north of a recent development, Lantern Park. That's the bulk of the Beauchamp property. We were able to acquire some property to the south from the developer of the Lantern Park subdivision. And the goal in that is to allow us to incorporate the trail network into ours and give us a little additional buffer area. So I'll talk more about that in a minute, but again, just high-level overview of the location of the property. You'll note that we have a major border with the upcoming Lantern Commons subdivision, Woodside Drive, an older large lot residential community. Our northern border is the cemetery, so kind of a sensitive buffer there for both of us, and then some state parcels to the east who have their primary access points off of Oak Road. This is not a great image, but as you zoom in, this is what I can find as far as the comp plan. I think somebody took a pretty hefty highlighter here to note the employment corridor. The area in yellow here is the subject property. Union Street is kind of straddles that yellow line on the left. So my assumption is the property is primarily suburban residential in the comp plan. Just noting that we're kind of the transition zone between what we're calling the employment corridor on US 31 and the existing residential. So we're assuming that we are residential and knowing that we have to kind of figure out the transition from Lantern Commons to the subject property. As we look at development, and this has become kind of a practice for Old Town, is we look at opportunities and constraints. You know, what does this property offer that we want to, enhance, kind of celebrate in our land planning? A lot of it has to do with, figuring out, what's most marketable to our clients, but also trying to save the best of maybe the green spaces on the property, so paying attention to that. And then we really spend a lot of time on constraints as well. And sometimes constraints are things like a cemetery to the north of us, or Cool Creek would be a great example of both an opportunity and a constraint. Recognizing Lantern Commons is going to really change the landscape along Union Street and be a fairly intense commercial development. We think that's an opportunity for clients who might live here that want walkable amenities and potential restaurants. But it's also a constraint in that we got to figure out how to transition our density from what's existing here on this property to larger commercial development to the west. So as we looked at really what we felt like would serve the market well based on consumer demand in the area, and what we feel like is a good use of the I guess, the best of the green space on the property, and trying to figure out what a neighborhood that we consider traditional neighborhood design. So it's not necessarily just eclectic for the sake of being eclectic, but product types that, I guess, transition well within our own development. And with that, we looked at creating this node of 3-story townhome product along Union Street, so that it's adjacent and across the street from what we're expecting to be 3-story product in Lantern Commons. So having our more high-density development along Union Street, and then transitioning within our development to the lower-density single-family product. So again, the yellow boxes represent 3-story townhomes. The pink represents rear-load garage single-family homes on an alley network. And the orange represent front-load garage product that is approximately 62 feet wide. And I'll show you some examples of what I mean by that. Really, this project came about because I think as the Beauchamps were trying to determine what to do with their property, and I has, for me, been a very enjoyable partnership working alongside them. I think they wanted to have the opportunity to see this project developed while they were still in control of the property and lived on it and could influence the quality of what would get built here. They were aware of our participation in a development in Carmel called Jackson's Grant at 116th and Spring Mill. And it really had a very similar mix of product types within that community. And I think that caught their attention. And when we first discussed this project, it was, we'd like to see something come together very similar to what you did at Jackson's Grant. And that was kind of the spirit behind how we planned this subdivision. I'm going to invite Ed Hamilton in just a second to share kind of the green spaces and kind of how we worked with the conditions of the site. But just high-level summary here, we're showing 56 townhomes, all fronting this Union Street corridor, 25 single-family rear-load garage served homes, and then 32 front-load garage homes, each backing to a green space. We've had, obviously neighborhood meetings, and I'm sure throughout the process here and public hearing tonight, we'll hear additional comments that will influence our final land plan. But I'll note already, we've discussed some additional buffering here along this property line, these 3 largest parcels that are neighbors. We've had some discussion, a very healthy discussion with those neighbors about the kind of buffering they'd like to see there. So we already have some changes we know about to enhance the buffering there that we'll bring back at future meetings. I'm going to advance to just a character image to show you our intentions here. This is a development we did in downtown Carmel, just to give you a sense of scale of lots. So these orange lots are very similar in size. They're actually the exact same size as these front loads here. And then across the street, I just used Google Maps and just turned my camera 180 degrees, and directly across the street, these pink lots here are similar in size to what's shown here. I'm going to talk about architecture in a minute, but overall, this is the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish with these use types across the street from one another. Similarly, I grabbed a screenshot of a section of Village West Clay that showed how 3-story townhomes are integrated into a single-family portion of the neighborhood. So that's what we're trying to accomplish with blending single-family and 3-story townhome product within our development. With that, I'm going to invite Ed up to share a little more about kind of the land plan and drainage, because I know this is a sensitive site, and we're going to have a lot of questions about that. Ed?
All right. Ed Hamilton with Apollo Developers. As Justin noted, this Cool Creek presents both an opportunity and a constraint at this site. I apologize if I get overly technical. I'm a civil engineer, so I get a little too much into the weeds sometimes. But this site has a couple drainage features on it. You can see there's 3 areas that are shaded in light blue. There's this one's labeled Floodplain Mitigation, and these 2 are detention ponds. So in Hamilton County, pretty typical throughout the country, you're required to have stormwater detention. So these 2 ponds here are your traditional There'll be open water detention ponds that take the water from the development and hold it and release it at a lower rate than the existing. This third pond is floodplain mitigation. So with Cool Creek, this lightly dashed pink line is the floodway. So within the floodplain that Cool Creek has, there's a couple different components. Hopefully I don't get too technical here and lose you, but the floodplain area has two areas. There's the floodway, which is the area that's designated as the area reserved to move the base flood. So the models dictate if you start to encroach on that, that water is going to start going up, either for the folks upstream or downstream. So that is highly regulated. DNR at the state level regulates that. So we are not putting any fill in the floodway. Outside of that, there are some areas that's the floodplain fringe. That's more for storage. So as the water gets up, it's not necessarily needed to move the water. If you were to fill in it, it's not going to push it above the threshold where you're raising it too much for the folks upstream and downstream. That area is not regulated by the state. It's regulated by both your UDO and the Hamilton County Surveyor's Office. So while we are not filling in the floodway here, we are filling in the floodplain fringe areas. There's some, and most of it's actually, ironically, to build these detention ponds to hold back the water. So by filling in there, we're actually providing for every cubic yard we fill in the floodplain fringe areas, we're actually taking out 3 cubic yards, so 3 times the volume. And we're doing it at a lower elevation. So we are mitigating for the fact that there will be some fill in here. I wanted to point that out to you. The second thing is we really see, we love this site. It's beautiful. We've walked it plenty of times, looked at just about every tree, identified wetlands to try to preserve them. We did our best to not only look at the product and how to step it down, but how to preserve those natural features. So the main one's obviously Cool Creek. We do plan to preserve all of the mature trees and the creek itself along here. There is an existing drive that goes back to the property. We are planning to preserve that, not just as access to the home and the antique store, but also for the community to use to walk along Cool Creek. We do have an overlook plan. There's kind of a particularly pretty spot right here that we're proposing to put, a bench for folks to sit and enjoy Cool Creek. We'll also loop it back within the neighborhood. The second part of that, there is a small creek or stream that runs through the property. Again, we do plan to preserve that as well as the mature vegetation adjacent to it. So we're preserving these 2 riparian corridors, and that goes all the way up from the start of our property through the 7 acres. That's west of Cool Creek, adjacent to Lantern Park. So it's about that's about a quarter mile, if I'm not mistaken, that we're going to preserve as part of our project. Not only are we going to preserve it, we're going to put a tree preservation easement over it to make sure that that is preserved in the future. The Hamilton County Surveyor's Office does maintain it. They have their own rights, but we're planning to preserve that as well as the trees along here. There's about 1.5 acres of the overall 12.5 acres of mature woods that will be impacted. We tried our best to minimize it. There's a small row of trees here that where we're putting the detention pond. There's another island of trees. We're trying to maintain as much. We are going to maintain a little bit of it, but as we get into final engineering, we'll try to increase that as much as we can. And then there's a small section right here. Again, it's like a row of trees that will be impacted. And there will also be where we cut across with the road will impact that area. And lastly, there's a small section right here near Union Street. So it does appear in the aerial that there's mature trees here. This area was historically farmed, and recently, I say recently, within the last 20 years or so, that went fallow and vegetation grew up, that will be cleared. The open space overall is 56%. Of course, that includes part of the 6 acres down here, but we're also proposing to preserve a little bit of the area between the cemetery, in addition to putting a 50-foot berm to provide some screening from them. And then Justin mentioned the increased screening we have here on the east side. So, I think that covers the site.
Okay, I'm going to run through product in the 27 seconds I have left. We are proposing what we're calling transitional architecture. Ultimately, Old Town strives to develop custom homes individualized to clients, but we are finding a trend towards modern roof lines and, I would say traditional roof lines, but modern elements in the architecture. And it's forward. So very similar materials that you see on traditional homes that we've already built in the community, but as a for example, on townhomes, again, traditional roof lines, but modern facades. Same with rear load garages on the home, on the alley served product. Again, traditional roof lines. A lot of, if you look at Pinterest or Howells, you see a lot of what is referred to as Scandinavian-inspired architecture. That's kind of the trend du jour, but ultimately, we're finding that a lot of our buyers are looking for something a little more edgy and modern, but still with traditional roof lines and traditional materials. And again, front load product, again, similar concept. I showed you at the beginning some character images as far as streetscape of existing homes we've done. We've done a lot of what people would call, cottage or craftsman or American farmhouse style architecture. The reality is, a lot of our consumers are getting bored with that. They want something modern and edgy, and our goal is to continue to serve consumers in the community and continue to raise the bar on architectural styles. Again, customized product type for each section of the neighborhood in a TND neighborhood, which we think is representative of what Westfield's striving for as far as mixed-use type, mixed residential communities. With that, I'll step aside and allow the public hearing to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move into the public hearing, opening it at 9:02 p.m.
I have one card for John Boyer.
My name's John Boyer, and I'm a neighbor of Bob and Michelle Beauchamp. I live directly behind their antique store. I have a 3-acre homestead, and I live along Oakwoods Lane, and there are 7 other neighbors that have a total of 40 acres of homes along there divided by 7. So they average about 4 to 6 acres each. So these are AGS F1. They're larger homes, and we represent a completely different neighborhood from the project just to the south of this proposal. So I hope that there's a consideration made that when this fits along Union Street next to some existing empty nester homes on 1/4-acre lots, that you keep in mind that there are 4-acre lots behind that also have to abide with this. My main concern is that this is listed as a PUD, and PUDs have the habit of growing commercial. And we don't want walk-in restaurants, walk-in tattoo parlors, walk-in ice cream stores to fit in with all these homes. So as a residential area, we're not opposed to it, but we don't want the commercial that possibly would come with it. Thank you. And there was a comment made that neighbors had given inputs. The 7 neighbors along our lane did not participate in that, so I don't know if these were the people in Lantern Commons they talked to. They didn't talk to us. Thank you.
Heather Summer.
Good evening, members of the commission. It's nice to see you in person. I was actually here for the Lantern Commons, so I think you can guess where my property might be. So I didn't get to see you in person, so I appreciate you hearing some of my thoughts. If you could pull up the image, is that possible? Can I go? Sure. This one? Yeah. I'm very familiar with Old Town Design Group's product. They make a lovely product. That is definitely not my concern, the quality of the product that would be here. And to the Beauchamps, you have a lovely property, and we get the benefit of enjoying all that's on their property because we face it. So if you see the Woodside Estates, we have a 3-parcel lot totaling 4 acres. We have a strip that borders the new Lantern Commons, and then we are the only direct neighbor, essentially, to this project. So we will be facing those townhouses. Just a few thoughts that I wanted to share since I've been through this process with Lantern Commons. There do seem to be some commonalities from the experience with this particular part of Westfield. With these proposed projects, it comes across as if citizens, homeowners, property owners hold little value. We received the notification of this project in the neighborhood meeting 1 week ago today. It gave us 2 days' notice for attendance to a neighbor meeting, which we weren't able to accommodate within our schedule, and 1 week to prepare thoughts, responses, reflections on this scenario. These developments and plans seem to already be a done deal before the information reaches the neighbors. It doesn't appear that feedback is greatly desired or considered. Rather, it seems that it's a step simply required, simply a formality. And with Lantern Commons, there were a lot of suggestions made by neighbors. I think I made a very long list of suggestions. And it didn't appear that any of those were heeded. As neighbors, it feels like we have lost the battle before it starts. And I understand the complexities in these approvals, having just listened to all the ones tonight. These are not simple tasks. But citizens and neighbors seem to be very diminished. It's very frustrating and discouraging. As it relates to this specific project, plan and location, as the Beauchamps know, this is an amazing animal habitat. Coyote, fox, deer, wild turkeys can all be seen from our windows. There is a concern that the clearing of trees is the ones that's right in front of us for those townhouses. Light pollution continues to be a concern with Lantern Commons in this proposal. You don't have the density issue here. My concern is more the density issue along Union Street. Obviously, it's much larger lots overall. And it's already difficult to get in and out of Woodside Estates. That's been a concern of the Lantern Commons. And that part of Union Street and 161st Street backs up quite a bit. We know there's a roundabout plan. So I just wanted to share the concerns and frustrations about how we feel like we don't have much of a voice in the community. And I am for development in many locations. It's just where the most appropriate parts. I would love to see places that are already cleared out developed or vacant spots developed, because there are wonderful things about this development. So I just ask that you would consider our situation and just perspective on these processes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pam, I had listed this one on my card. I didn't know if you noticed that I had 2 on there. That's what I've done before. Linda Nass, 1122 East 161st Street. Well, if you expanded this out, this is my neighborhood. Okay, I've lived in it for 30 years, and some of these people even longer. But I'm on the other side of 31, but these were my neighbors, still are my neighbors. I know people in all these areas around. And what I want you to look at as you widen this out is, these are large lots across 31 from me. I live on acreage. The neighbors I lost on 32 on the west side were on large lots, but they will be commercial, and we're all okay with that. But if you go from here and you go all the way to the east, and even if you go south of 161st Street where Cool Creek is, these are neighborhoods of very large lots. They're not going to change because they are neighborhoods. It's not like somebody's going to subdivide their acres, or Mr. Boyer isn't going to subdivide his. These are very specific neighborhoods. And you all have been talking about neighborhoods, and I so appreciate that, because we know when we came here, neighborhoods attracted us. We know people who still come here are attracted by neighborhoods. And you made the specific consideration that in that Lantern Commons, which is going to be on the west side of Union Street, which is the employment corridor, anything within 75 feet of the homes in Woodside could be no more than 2 stories high. That's part of that PUD, but here we're putting these really dense 3-story townhomes there. So I'm looking at this, as I look at my neighborhood and talk to my neighbors, it's like, what exactly are we transitioning? Because how does that transition to these large lots over here? The cemetery is a wonderful divider. I live by a cemetery. These people do. It's a great place to live. The apartments across on the west side there of the cemetery, those aren't very dense either, and they don't sit right up on the street. So we're so used to going down Union Street, and we love the little Liberty Park, and we love that it's not so dense. And even as we look through Lantern Commons, and you go to the apartments in Lantern Commons, and the multi-levels, they are not just rows and rows and rows and rows. They're not designed like that. They're like neighborhoods. There's grass. So I realize that there's concerns with the water and what have you. This is not totally buildable. Those people who have acreages, we know they're not totally buildable. You got to leave space for the water and what have you. But we just don't see this as transitioning between, for example, the Woodside neighborhood, the apartments to the north, the cemetery, and everything to the east and south of here. Just because Lantern Commons is there, but it isn't as dense as this is. So, as we've been talking, this is our concern. We just ask you to help us keep a neighborhood here. I don't expect it to be a 30-year-old neighborhood, but I know that these people have value their land and their lots and their large lots. And this is the southeast residential suburban area. It is not downtown by any means. Downtown is quite a bit north of here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susie Tatum, and I live on Oak Road. I am a neighbor of John Boyer, who spoke earlier, and of course a neighbor of the Beauchamps. We've lived in this area for pushing 30 years and have about 2.5 acres of forest. You can see where Oak Road is to the east of this property. And I guess my point that I want to make is really just a plea to help us preserve the green spaces, the beautiful trees that the Beauchamps and all of the neighbors have enjoyed, our wildlife. We have so many deer, so many coyotes, all kinds of critters that we really love. And I know development is here. This is Westfield. We are growing, but there is a way to do it responsibly and while preserving the wildlife corridors and our green spaces and those wonderful trees that we spoke about, and the beautiful neighbors to the north and to the west of this property, Woodside, I believe. So I guess I'm just pleading that you consider that and listen to all of us neighbors. And I do like the development. It's very high quality, but I like the trees more. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others present that are interested in making a comment? I did not put a reminder out at the beginning of this. Have we received any emails, though?
We have not.
Okay. Now, it's been open for quite a while, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing at 9:14. And we'll go around to commissioner or you want to go ahead and respond to, we've had quite a few public comments, so let's go ahead and hit those.
Yeah,
off the
I'll be
top.
brief. I'm sure we're all exhausted tonight, but the reality is that there's been the quiet enjoyment of the Beauchamps green space for quite a while, and I think any change to it is going to be felt. And so our goal is to hear comments and find out what we can accommodate and make adjustments. And so the goal is not to rush the process. And, I heard one comment around, a pre-baked decision or it not being a public process. That's why we're here tonight, is to have a public process. That's why you have a requirement that we host a neighborhood meeting and take comments. And that neighborhood meeting resulted in plan changes already, and we're going to take comments tonight and make future adjustments. So I think based on past experience working with us, you know that we understand that's part of the process, and we're prepared to engage with neighbors. There's a reality, though, that I think we set a pretty high bar from the start. It's not normal that you have PUDs submitted to you with 56% green space to start. You know, the reality is we understood there was something special here that we wanted to work to preserve the best of, and so that really influenced our plans early. So as opposed to maybe some other development petitions you see, we don't put red herring plans out there for you to tear apart and then come back in with a lower density. The reality is we delivered what we thought was a great plan from the beginning, so that's what you see here. So not ashamed of it, and doesn't mean there's not room for improvement, but we're really looking to sort out what are substantive comments that we can respond to. Reality is Lantern Commons is a much more dense development than this will ever be. So I don't know how to respond to that, but it is a mixture of 2, 3, 4-story buildings. There is a requirement of 2 stories within 75 feet of the property line. Very specifically, that building you see mentioned as A2, strategically placed so it's 75 feet away from the property line, so it can be 3 stories. We're a similar situation. We will be 75 feet or greater from any single-family residential neighbor. We understand what it means to transition scale, and we think that we'll be able to accommodate that. I think there's a general misunderstanding about the nature of PUDs. They actually provide pretty strict requirements for development of property. They're the new rule book for how this property will be regulated ongoing. And so it's not like we can sneak something and all of a sudden use it for some specific commercial purpose. I do want to acknowledge, since it was brought up, though, that our PUD does preserve the rights for the Beauchamps to operate their antique business on the property ongoing. So want to make everybody aware of that. But we're talking about price points ranging from $450,000 to $1 million. And it would be very important to our home buyers to not have any commercial uses within this development. We're pretty excited about the commercial development that's proposed to happen at Lantern Commons. I think as Westfield grows, that's one of the things that makes this really attractive is modern home buyers are looking for walkability to amenities in the area. And so one of our goals, I'm saying we, but when we look at planning for suburban communities, we're frequently trying to get reasonable density within walkable distance to amenities to hope to encourage people to use their vehicles less. So I think this is a great example of that. I'm sure there'll be plenty of comments from the Planning Commission members, so I'm going to sit back and listen, but just wanted to give you those few pieces of feedback to start. Thank you.
Thank you. We will start providing those comments with Andre Maui.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a wonderful first pass, and I appreciate, Justin, you said something so eloquently about how this is a property that many of us have enjoyed so much, and anything that goes here is gonna, it's sensitive, right? We're gonna really feel it. Immediately when I looked at this, I recognized the effort that you put into the transition from west to east. I like most of that. I did have a little bit of a concern right off the bat, which we heard tonight. I'm not surprised at all about the northern portion of the townhouses right across from Woodside. I think you've met, as you mentioned, kind of the letter, the 75 feet and everything else like that. But as far as intent, that might be something that could be toned down a little bit up there. I'd probably start in that area more than any place else in terms of focusing a little bit more transition there. I think you've done a great job preserving a lot of the key features. So that's really nice to see. And I'll say for any development to happen here, I'm really glad to see Old Town's name working on it because I do like your product and I have a lot of trust in your efforts. And we've seen your tremendous effort in accepting community input. One of the challenges for myself as we go through this is to ignore the fact that it says Old Town on there and look at the ordinance as it gets written as if you're not the one doing it. And I have yet to dig into the language that way. So thanks for the efforts thus far, and if I come up with anything more, I'll send it through.
Thank you. Kristen Berkman.
I had a couple things on the open space, just trying to understand that, Justin. I'll let you respond in a moment, but this piece that was part of Lantern Park that you're transitioning to your plan, I guess I'd just like to hear more about why that's happening. That would have been open space at the other neighborhood, and I understand you're keeping it as open space, but it does feel like a double count a little bit, so we can go through and you can, if you can address that at the end, I would appreciate it. I've looked at this one a lot, and I'm a little concerned about the townhomes along Union. And I'm feeling like with the 3-story townhome, is it going to feel a little bit like a tunnel through there when Lantern Park is back off the road a little bit? There's been some tree preservation over on the Lantern Commons side. You do have the AGSF1 neighborhood, the Woodside neighborhood. Then you have the cemetery. I just don't want like a tunnel effect coming off of 161st Street as you go downtown. And as you go on, there's single-family homes that face Union, like a neighborhood, like some of the feel that the people of Westfield love. And I'm just concerned that these townhomes are going to not reflect that type of feel, if that makes sense. And I'm especially concerned for the neighbors in Woodside to have 3-story townhomes across from them. I love how much of the open space you have. I guess I would just kind of like clarification on, I think I heard you say 50%, almost 50% on that. And kind of, I think in the PUD it talked a little bit about having some intentional areas of landscape where it would be an area for those residents to have some passive recreation. I guess just a little more explanation on that would be appreciated as well. But I do like your transition to bigger lots over to these other neighbors that have the bigger lots going towards Oak Road, and would appreciate you working with that group if they feel like they haven't had a voice in the process yet. Thank you.
It's great that you're keeping notes during this phase of things. If you'd like to stand to be a little more timely in your responses, assuming you have them, you're welcome to go ahead and do that. So if there's anything about what Andre or Kristen have commented on that would be great to hear in more real time to their comments, we can go ahead and do that.
Great. I'm gonna, if I can figure out how to work your computer here, I'm gonna acknowledge that related to the townhomes, I think we want to go back and explore that some more and bring you more feedback on that. I don't necessarily share the concern about the tunnel effect. I think that's all in how we handle the massing of the units and how we step back units, how we change roof lines. So again, that might be something that we'd explore further in a rendered streetscape image to say, here's how we think it will look. Do you have the same opinion now? So I think there's more work to be done there. I do hear the concern around, what's across from Woodside Drive. I couldn't tell you how it's a different circumstance than, and actually it's probably vastly improved from what would exist in Lantern Commons as far as large-scale commercial structures 75 feet from the property line versus what feels like a residential structure across the street, significantly further than 75 feet, just as apples and oranges. So I think that's on us to kind of show what a streetscape could look like. I did want to, because I think this is very confusing, I wanted to acknowledge the Lantern Park PUD. In section 5.2 of that PUD, and I'm going to skip down, Parcel B shall not be deemed as a common area, nor shall be deeded to and maintained by a homeowners association. It shall not be part of the common area maintained by the homeowners association. Parcel B may remain in private ownership or be deeded to a private or public agency for development and maintenance. We are not double counting if you include the entirety of our acreage separate from this 6 acres that we purchased, or we have a purchase agreement to purchase from the entity that owns that, we still are at that 57% green space. So if you include the entire PUD area of the Beauchamp parcel, and you add this in, it actually goes up from there as far as a percentage. When they developed Lantern Park, they specifically, I've never even seen this language in PUD, very specifically excluded this. And I think for a purpose such as this, the potential to add it to some other project. We ultimately wanted connectivity. We wanted our paths to connect down to 161st Street so our residents could walk down to the corner of 161st. And so as we were in dialogue with the adjacent property owner, the offer was made for us to acquire this, and it seemed like a logical choice. So in the reading of their PUD, I don't see any issue with us acquiring this and including it in ours.
Good with that?
It is very unusual.
Justin, can I ask one other quick thing? On the landscaping along Union Street, I was a little bit confused on that as well. I thought it said you were waiving the landscaping along the trail. No?
No, ma'am. To clarify, we have a landscape plan submitted. Was there any?
The exclusion was street tree requirements because the townhomes will be facing Union Street. They'll have their own landscaping. So instead of having like trees, I'm counting as both street trees and the landscaping on the lot for the townhomes. That's why we had shown it. And then, as a matter of fact, after we did that, staff had noted that that wouldn't have applied to Union Street anyway. So that part is actually being removed from the ordinance.
Okay.
So we will have trees in front of the units if approved.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. McCarty?
At our last APC meeting, the mayor stood before us, and one of the questions he rose is, what is the infill going to look like? And if the infill in many areas can look like this, I think that'll be fantastic. I love the architecture that you've brought forth and using the examples that are down in Carmel, and I think it'll be very unique for our area. And much like the Beauchamps, I would much rather have you be involved in this process as opposed to not being involved after the fact, because I think that, again, adds to the uniqueness for this property. Just in terms of addressing the concerns, when you have the right-of-way across from the neighborhood to the east there, I believe it's the woman's property who spoke. Traditionally, we want right-of-ways right across from each other just to alleviate any traffic concerns, not have to pull out in front of each other and so forth. So I definitely see the reasoning for that. In regards to that most northern parcel of townhomes, if that is there at all, because like those who have spoken before, I like that wooded area. Granted, I love that you guys have the 56%. I mean, again, that's a dream for us. So to come out of the gate, that's awesome. But if townhomes are going to be there, maybe to help with the transition concerns that have already been addressed or mentioned, is instead of having 3-story townhomes, go down to 2-story due to the apartments to the north. Those along the east, as well as to the west, north of the cemetery, are all 2-story. So maybe that'll just help with the aforementioned tunnel effect, as well as just, again, the transition. Now, again, granted, this project is going to look much, much, much nicer than what already exists. I think I jotted down a lot of notes, but we've already covered a lot of items, and I'm sure other commissioners up here will have other topics to speak on as well. So yeah, I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kelleher?
Well, let me just start with the negatives. And it's, again, the townhomes along Union, north of your entrance, across from Woodside Drive. I just don't feel that's a transition that's appropriate at all to that neighborhood. The 56% open space is great. However, you can take credit for it, but a lot of it is unbuildable, so, you know, I'm not gonna give you a whole 100% credit for 56.
We can split the
A lot
difference.
of it you had to
Yeah.
do. But I appreciate, it's almost like a conservation subdivision, where you started off with saying, what are the constraints, or what are the areas that are pretty that we want to preserve? So I'm really positive about how you look at things and how you design things. Again, my biggest concern is those homes or townhomes across from Woodside. And even the ones on Union, maybe 3-story wouldn't be appropriate, but as you said, it's the streetscape. So with Jackson's Grant, many of those things are set back from the road. So setting them back, lowering the height, lots of things that can be done, and that's why I look forward to see what, you know, what you're proposing along there.
Thank you. Mike? Yeah.
Don't have many comments, just it's a beautiful property, and can't imagine that Justin and Old Town partnering with the Beauchamps wouldn't produce anything but a wonderful outcome. Yeah, I guess I do like the transitioning from the townhomes to the cottages to the villas, but again, if there's a way to do it without the townhomes, I think that would be even better. But again, I don't know how practical that is. Always want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to respond. And I noticed in the neighborhood meeting remarks, you were very thorough in addressing those neighbors that had brought up concerns, and loved seeing that. But then had a few people say tonight they either didn't go to the meeting or they didn't know about the meeting, and again, I don't know what happened there, but always love for everyone to be able to be heard, even prior to the public hearing here. And again, someone expressed concern about commercial being a part of this PUD, and I just can't foresee that happening, not with the design you have, the quality of the product that you're putting in there with the types of homes and such, but otherwise, like I said, you guys partnering together, I just can't see how this won't be a home run.
Thank you. Cindy Spoljarek?
Well, and just like Andre said, we do have the concern that this is zoning for the property, not for you. And so you could turn around and sell this the minute you get it approved. And so we have to always consider that. And, you know, again, presentations and pictures are nice, but if I don't really know what that means for a standard, or how someone else could apply that, then that's what starts to kind of concern me. So I do have, again, some notes that I'll have to get to you and staff. My biggest problem too, with two things, is losing a lot of those trees on the north side. There's not many areas that have significant areas of trees left anymore, and to see that getting developed makes me sad, especially for the wildlife here. The townhomes, there's 28 units that could be up to 40 feet tall, just right up on the road. And when you travel along Union Street, you just don't have any of that. And I think this is really going to stick out in a not so good way, because I don't think it fits with the character of our community. And going back to the comp plan, it kind of, you know, it doesn't have that continuity that you could expect. So I'm just, that's one of my biggest concerns. When you get further back into the project, you know, that's not as visible, and you know, that's, again, lower on my concern list. But these townhomes right up and just lined up, no staggering, again, no anti-monotony or anything like that built in, and not knowing what exactly we're getting, because again, you want it to be transitional, so it could be a lot of different things. But like, I don't know what a modern panel is, and that's one of the siding types. Does staff know what a modern panel is? Maybe you do. I don't.
It's a,
I don't.
on the James Hardy website, it's a Hardy panel. It's a manufactured product that we use in more of a modern application, so I can give you examples of that.
Okay. I just have a lot of those kind of concerns in here because, again, when you say that something's going to be the primary, and then I don't know what to expect on the rest either, and I'm not quite sure if that has to then meet our standards or not, because it seems like some of the architecture would be a tricky thing to have it fit into some of our standards that we typically expect. And just like talking about a roof line, there look like, you know, if our standard is 612 or 812, but you have things that look like a primary could be a lot less than that or a whole different style. Again, we wouldn't know, and that's going to be up to staff to try and figure out what's compliant, of course. And again, you have one thing in your mind, but if you sell it tomorrow, I don't know what someone else has in mind.
Yep, fair.
Yeah, I'll get you the rest of my comments in writing.
Great. Well, while we're on that subject, though, of kind of theme I'm hearing, I mean, I think, you know, I want to acknowledge that, you know, this is the approved circumstance across the street. And so we're kind of saying that the Beauchamp property is responsible for bearing the brunt of any transition from commercial. And so what is the appropriate use type across the street from that? You know, we don't think that three-story townhomes are, you know, ugly. I think that devil's in the details, Cindy. I think you're absolutely right. We might need some more verbiage and or more strict language around staggering and monotony, that sort of thing. So I do think there's work to be done there, but there's also a reality that they might not be the most desirable lots. If we had programmed single-family homes there, that was a legitimate concern of ours that we spent a lot of time kind of considering what wants to look directly across the street from the Lantern Commons project. This is pretty intense commercial development. And so, you know, what we don't want to end up with is platting a series of single-family lots and have those be the undesirables and have kind of missing teeth along Union Street forever. And so I think that was our response, was we think it could be attractive. I think there's work to be done, but yeah, hear your comments, but we have some different opinions there as well.
Going back to architecture real quick, I can say that from a staff perspective, there were significant architectural comments. We did share some of your same concerns about the detail and the language in the exhibits versus the text of the ordinance. So we would expect to see changes on that before it comes back.
Okay, thank you.
You're good? Thank you. Dave Schmitz.
Thank you. I think my outlook on this is that, you know, with the Beauchamps being involved and having a vested interest going forward, still continuing to have their home and business there and having Old Town involved, but, you know, both groups, the developer and the owners, have contributed so much to this town, to the city, that I have a great degree of confidence that where we end up is going to be something that is going to be attractive. The references to Jackson's Grant and Village of West Clay are both, if that's where we end up and have that kind of feel with this development, I think we're all going to be happy with it. That said, I share the concerns with the townhomes, particularly the northern section above the entrance, north of the entrance, as others have stated. And look forward to hearing, going forward and seeing what revisions you make.
That's it. Thank you. Mike Johns.
For sake of brevity, I would just say that I pretty much agree with everything that's been said so far tonight. I think Justin's got some good starting points here. And I would also ask you to sign in blood that you will do this development. It will go a long way toward getting it approved.
I'll have to talk to the boss behind me.
That's my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't replicate, but reinforce. There are a lot of important things that have been brought up tonight that we look forward to seeing revisions at the whatever point in time it is that you come back. If you can, as has been mentioned, if you can replicate a Jackson's Grant, I've driven through there numerous times. It's one of the few places that if it was in my price range could possibly lure me out of Westfield. So,
Appreciate you giving us the time to share tonight. Thank you.
so, thank you. That completes our scheduled agenda items. Everything else, quite a few of them, is continued to future meeting and takes us to reports and comments from Planning Commission members. Do we have any Plan Commission members with general comments for the group? And if not, we'll hear from the City Council liaison.
Okay, we did meet November 22nd. The mayor recognized the Westfield Chamber's 40th anniversary, so that was very, very nice. We passed an ordinance authorizing the creation of the American Rescue Plan and appropriated the $4.9 million from the ARPA Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. Authorize additional appropriation for the proceeds of the sale of real estate to the building corporation concerning the new fire station. We introduced 3 additional appropriations for legal fees, fire, and public works. And introduction for the 2020 elected official salary ordinance, and approved the 2022 meeting dates. And one other thing I would like to say, we have the ARPA public information session tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here at City Hall Assembly Room, right here. And I would like to see as many as I can come here or submit questions in advance, because I will have our legal team that's helping us, Barnes and Thornburg, available to answer questions on how we use those funds. That's it.
Thank you. I don't believe there was a BZA meeting, or was there?
Correct, next week.
That's what I thought. So no report there. Community Development Department, anything to share with us tonight?
Couple things. Pam's going to be passing down the line here. At your last meeting, you approved certain orders that go to the RD, or for the RDC process.
Mhm.
They need all of your signature. If you could, please, before you leave, that would be great. And it does look like we're shaping up for a December 20th meeting, so kind of keep that on your radar. I know it's right before the holidays, but I think we have some business that we're looking to wrap up before the end of the year, so. Do you want me to say something about that? Go for it.
So to that point, I'm not sure how the meeting that you just noticed for tomorrow night, you mentioned, if it was not noticed as a joint meeting, then a majority of members cannot go. So I encourage you to submit all your comments to her prior to, but unless it's a joint meeting.
It has been noticed as a public meeting.
But a joint meeting of more than one, in other words, it's not just a council meeting, but plan commission members are also in attendance?
No, it's an ARPA committee, it's just a general information session. It's not a formal committee meeting or anything like that.
Those qualify as any committee that is formed under, I assume this is formed under council. It's not right, is this something that the council created?
The ARPA committee, yes.
Yes, okay. It still qualifies as a governing body, and it's still, even though it's not a public hearing, it's a meeting. Meetings where qualify under the law is anything where information is received. So even if no final decisions are made, it's anything where information is received. So I have no problem with plan commission members attending if it was noticed that this committee and plan commission members intend to plan. But if it's something, if it was not advertised in that way, then I can't have a majority of this board go without potentially violating the open door law.
All right, I'm guessing many of you probably wouldn't have shown up, and it was just me being hopeful that you would, so you can watch it online too.
I think we have been educated.
Yes, yes, it will. You can't.
Not in real time. I'm not sure where that would have been. I was just looking at our agendas and minutes on the website, and I don't see that here. Maybe it's just on a calendar.
Chris told me it was all done, so I'll resend it then.
So, all right. I believe that completes things for the evening. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second from Dr. Kelleher and Cindy Spoljarek. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 9:44.